When I started, there was so much information, it was overwhelming. And eventually I found that I really wanted to focus on mimicking nature and following the more natural approach. And once I chose that, I realized there was a lot of missing information and a lack of ability to find these premium products that a lot of the enthusiasts were using. You couldn't just go to the garden store and buy it. So once I found that out, I decided that I would be great at answering people's questions. I could help them get better results, and I could offer those rare products. And that's what started BuildASoil. And it's been just a continuing passion since then. And I swear every month we learn something new. There's no end of new things to learn about the soil and the garden.
So when you say build soil, are you helping people produce compost, or are there other things that fall into what it means to build soil?
So the name of the business is BuildASoil, and it came out of the term of, hey, I'd like to build a soil today. And most people doing that were trying to mix a potting soil recipe. And then eventually we started working with a lot of farms that are actually trying to build the soil that they own into something more productive. And so those are the two paths that someone may take. And either way, what we were able to leverage, a unique factor for BuildASoil, was that instead of just kind of offering a bag of soil like at Home Depot, we wanted to find out what would make a better version. And instead of putting out what's the lightest weight, cheapest way to make something a plant would grow in and market it for profit, we decided to say, what would we do from scratch at home? And we found that not only do you need compost, but the big problem with compost was that if we wanted to teach someone to grow over the phone or the internet, you could tell them, go buy this much compost and put it in your mix. But the variety and quality of compost from state to state and from region to region is vast. And so it's easier to tell someone, go buy this chemical. It's the same at every garden store. And so what we did is we started doing testing to determine what makes quality compost. How do we identify that? How do we share this message? And to this day, compost is still one of the harder parts, because if someone goes on Craigslist and just finds compost locally, it's like Russian roulette. It could be phenomenal. It could be terrible. And when you're just broadcasting some compost on a large piece of land, it's acceptable to not have it be the best compost, because you're at least adding organic matter and you're not really mixing it in, you're spreading it. But when you're making it potting soil, we want to use between 10 and 35% compost, depending on the recipe, and it can dramatically affect the quality of the finished product. So our standard recipe that we first learned when we started is 3 parts: 1 part compost, 1 part Canadian sphagnum peat moss, and 1 part aeration. We use pumice. The big box stores sell potting soil with perlite, and our soil we want people to keep forever, not to throw it away. Makes it more sustainable. And the perlite crushes and goes away over time. So we learned that the pumice works better and it's naturally mined from a volcanic substance. And so when you mix those together, we send it to the lab and we find out what's missing from a macronutrient, micronutrient that would be good for fast growing annual plants, like all of our vegetables, house plants, things that are, generally like a certain range. And we produced a soil, several recipes that meet those parameters. And so now when someone goes and they try our potting soil, they're getting something that is at the soil lab, looks to be in the proper order of nutrients, the right pH, the right mixture, and they get really good results. But then we go beyond that, and we're hoping to teach people to not be dependent on our bagged soil, but to learn how to make their own. And then eventually on acreage, as we talked about, people will also get a soil test for their farm, for their orchard, for their backyard. And we can help them navigate what that test means and what to add to their soil to make sure that it not only produces good results, but those crops that they consume now for themselves are more nutrient dense and better to nourish their body.
All right. So a couple definitions here. How do I know how much compost I need? I know it varies on what's in my soil, what's not, what I'm growing, etc.
So what's the scenario? Are you trying to make like a raised bed for a garden, or are you trying to amend an acre for, growing a crop? Or what do you think the main goal for?
That's what I'm going to ask you. For homesteaders, do you go by, like, let's say I'm going to plant, 1,000 square feet of plants. I don't know how you'd express it. Linear feet, square feet, whatever.
Yeah, so a lot of times.
How do I know how much compost would I need? Is there a calculation where you could estimate it?
There are some calculations. And when it comes to native soil, we prefer to look at a soil test, because that'll really truly tell us. There are some obvious approximations that you can use. And so the way we've done it is on our vegetable farm, we typically have like a 30-inch wide bed, so you can reach it from both sides. And maybe it's a 50-foot bed. And so you can calculate the amount of row feet that you might do for that type of bed, and you can make a general recommendation. And so usually it comes against affordability in that regard. Like, meaning it's, if you're getting really premium compost or you're making it from scratch, it's pretty hard to overdo it. So a lot of times we're just trying to justify what the budget will allow for that year to add compost.